So all of that to say, if you are waiting for a time where things settle and your life is like you're just this glowing, radiant being and everything is amazing, I think you're going to be waiting a very, very long time. And I really encourage you to share to the best of your ability right now, because there are people that are a year, couple years behind you in their journey. And it's not linear, obviously, but what I'm saying is you have learned lessons that are going to be very valuable for other people. And I am begging you to that you start to share them with the world. Okay. Did that bring up anything in anyone? Anybody have anything they need or want to share from that? Yeah, Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this, sorry, this ties back into what we were talking about just before, when we were talking about gene keys and human design, right? When you look at human design, the whole idea of decision making and energy management. I mean, if you take that approach, then that gives a lot of clarity, and then use the gene keys as the pathways of deconditioning. That journey is really about being aware of the shadow, right? But not hanging in them and stepping into the gift. And part of that gift, and that's the language I love from human design, is by stepping into our inner authority, right? And following our strategy. And when you literally start doing those quote unquote simple things, don't get me wrong, it's hard work. But if that's the main focus to begin with, things start to shift inside first. And I think that's the key thing I realize more and more when I look around me, when I look at my house, when I look at my family around me, or when I look at the stuff I do on a daily basis. Not a lot is changing. But when I look at how I respond to things, a whole lot is changing. And I think that's the whole thing. And I think that's what you were just talking about. What the world needs right now is not people running around frantically like, oh my God, what is going on out there? Because the world is going crazy. And it is, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of that going on. And connecting to our inner self, right? Getting to know our inner self is what it is really all about. And I saw Lily said it as well in the chat. It's all about that journey. I mean, I was listening, I think I was listening to you, one of your videos a while ago, and I was like, it's literally all about the moment we're in right now. There's a lot behind us where most people stick, right? That's when I like to talk about fear, the former experiences affecting reality. We can analyze those to death without actually doing a change right now. We can also move forward, as you just said, and then those will start to show up, and then we'll handle them.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a
Mm-hmm.
handling that needs to take place at a certain point in time. But that's part of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's the very initiative that we take that brings us the next set of lessons that we need in order to further the journey. Like, and so if we're not taking the initiative, we're kind of we're handcuffing ourselves and being stuck. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, okay. I know we're talking about making the first step towards whatever it is that we're each individually pining for. But is this once the call to action appears? Is this when you're first kind of like intrinsically motivated to do something and like, I guess then overriding the whatever X amount of factors for why not to do it,
Mhm.
all like probably fear related. But I guess my question is this what you're talking about from the point that you are inspired to do something, or is this even before that, which is like just start moving and then something will show up?
Got it. Yeah. And I think that honestly is going to vary depending on the individual, because I think
Okay.
some people are the type that are going to find reasons to justify not moving forward. And then I think there's other people that are going to justify moving forward even when they're not ready. And so I think it really takes some inner listening to decide which of those types of people, and this is something that is talked about in the Star Pearl as well, when you're taking the assessment, is like, think, are you the type of person that tends to like, if you're a seven, you're like, maybe I'm an eight, or are you the type of person when you're a seven, you're like, actually, I might be a six or even a five. And if you know that about yourself, then you can kind of adjust on the fly as you are scoring. And I would say it's the same thing here is like if you know you're the type of person that is hesitant to take action because of fear, then more than likely you're keeping yourself stuck in that cage without needing to keep yourself stuck in the cage. Whereas if you are the type of person that is like, I'm taking action even though I have zero clarity, I haven't looked at my internal drives at all, well, that's, maybe that person needs to pull back a little bit and take a second. I will say that any action taken from a place of not having clarity is going to add to more confusion. So we got to make sure that we have some sense of clarity. Now, that clarity doesn't necessarily mean, I think when people hear me say that, they think I need to be clear exactly about what is going to happen or what I'm going to do in the outer world. And that is not at all what I'm talking about with clarity here. What I'm talking about is you feel clear internally, meaning like you have this sense of knowing that it is the right time to take action. Even though you might not know what that action is, there's this internal alignment that now is the time to do it. Does that help make sense?
100%, yes.
Rebecca.
Hey, it's my
Hey.
first time here, so thank you.
Yeah,
It
thank you for
just
coming.
I was feeling kind of nervous too because this is going to be on YouTube or something, but I just have to say I can relate so much to everything you're going through, and it just made me feel just even showing up. Oh my gosh, I'm not alone because of the shame of all, all these things, and I'm just really starting to get a lot more confident, even though I'm a little nervous now with my gifts, but. Yeah, it helped my heart feel like I'm not alone. We're not alone, and that it's that struggle and it's those awkward moments where, like, that little tiny moment before we would share, and to just even me sharing, it's like, just do it, and that we're in this together, and to really open our hearts to receive that love, like to really look at because that's what helps instead of imploding into, oh my God, who am I to share? Oh, we can come up with a million excuses, not even to show up. Like, this is taking action too. Like Mac, how sweet is she? Her beautiful presence is touching everyone's hearts here. So she's doing the work too. We're all in this, and I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for having the courage to speak.
Thank
Um,
you.
and yeah, there's a thing that I was saying a couple months back very often, which is that everyone thinks that they need to be healed before they enter in relationship. But in reality, it's bringing that wound into relationship that creates intimacy. So if you're not willing to bring your wound into relationship, you are never going to have or reach intimacy in that relationship.
Yeah. It's interesting, but also to know too, with Kate, like my case of when not to bring the wound into relationship,
Totally. Yeah.
gets salt poured in it and everything else.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's finding that's beautiful. So thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. You got it.
Excited to connect.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, I'll speak into that a little bit more, which is the sphere of your culture is
Okay.
exactly what Rebecca was talking about here. So the sphere of your culture is about connecting into the culture around the community that you have around you, both, yes, this online community that we're all beautifully expressing right now, but also your local community. Like it's really, really important that you feel supported in your life, like in your day to day. And the way that that happens is exactly what Rebecca was just talking about. It's like taking the initiative just to show up. Just that is enough for these bonds to start to form around you. And then if you're like me, you felt cut off. I felt cut off. I felt cold. I felt like I wasn't supported. I felt like I needed to have the whole world on my back. I felt like I was out there alone. And it's because, not because people didn't want to help, it's because I had cut myself off from receiving that help. How could people help if I wasn't open to being helped? And the only way that happens is when we are willing to face our wound, we are willing to face our vulnerability. And I think it can be really helpful to remember that all of us are wounded. I think we tell ourselves, like, I'm different because I have this deep wound. But I'm telling you, the core wound is in every single person that is on this call right now in this moment. And so when you remember that, A, you can return non-love with love. B, you can offer them grace. And C, we can create heaven on earth and healing all of this in community together. That's what the future human is all about. It's about this collective consciousness and starting to do things in synarchy, right? We've got hierarchy, which is top down. We've got heterarchy, which is everybody has the same amount of power, which you'd think that would be the thing, but it's not in reality. What we really need is synarchy because there are times when a leader is needed and necessary. And that's what synarchy does is it's this force, this universal force that shifts control or leadership to whatever individual is most qualified or given, born with the gifts in that moment. That person comes up, they handle whatever situation is present, and then they go back down and heterarchy takes back over. And then the next situation comes, and then synarchy again comes and it bubbles up, and the person that needs to come forth to handles. And then in that way, that is really what how we're meant to operate. And that's what allows each of us to stay in our own gifts. And then we don't have to do it all. And we don't have to worry about doing it all. I can do the things that I'm good at, and I can trust that you're going to do the things that you're good at. And when we do that, we're all happy and we're really going to have a giant impact. Ryan, over to you, brother man. Val, I saw you. Ryan was up first, though.
Yeah, I wanted to backtrack. I think that and I think the name was Jan, at the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
Jan, sorry. Um, the the golden path or the activation sequence going one direction versus another. I'm fascinated by that concept.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's something in there that I'm missing. I've gone through and I brought awareness to it. Especially like the conscious side. The unconscious ones have been more in like the background and more of like a contemplation and like percolating into my awareness. But what is the direction have to do with it? And like, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think it has anything to do, like, as far as like, what does this mean to go backwards in the profile? I don't think there's anything specific or different there. Although what did just come to me is Richard talks about the activation sequence in reverse as being something that is good for people to do as they approach death. I cannot remember where I saw that. I will look for it and see if I can track it down.
He flips it around when he does that. Careful. So what I meant when I was talking about backwards, I literally meant you start with life's work, go to evolution, go to radiance and purpose. That's the first way, the inner journey, basically.
Yep.
But then what I meant with flipping around is you start with your purpose, like, hey, if this is my purpose, now let me from that
Thank you.
purpose start finding my radiance, right? Through my radiance, I'm better able to face challenges. So there will be more breakthroughs towards my evolution at that point. And as I grow and evolve, I can face more challenges in doing my life's work.
Mm-hmm.
What Richard does, I think what I've seen, and I know what you're talking about, he was talking about purpose, but then he moves to evolution first. Then he switches back into radiance, and then he goes up to life's work. And that's for people approaching, or at least when they think they're approaching death. And
yes.
That's literally a different journey.
Do you remember where he talks about that, Jan? I want to say it's in the activation sequence work somewhere.
I think he does.
Yeah.
Oh, I just put a comment in the whatever it's called chat. It's right at the end of the first sequence because I've literally just done it.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
But
So it's right at
from kind of I'm an occultist, so I've come to this from tarot and Kabbalah and all of that funky stuff.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, it's probably also really useful to do just as you're falling asleep.
Agreed. Yeah, I saw that you put that. I totally agree with that.
Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. So anyone that is more curious about that kind of Jan is absolutely correct. It's not actually in complete reverse, but if you're curious about that death piece, it's at the end of the activation sequence work. So back to Ryan to answer your question. For me, it's kind of like just looking at a problem through a different lens. Like if we're able to reframe problems. So like for example, I microdose psilocybin, I don't know, maybe a couple times a week, let's say 2 or 3 times a week. And when I do that, I really feel like my problem awareness and the way that like, I'm just much more creative in how I approach problems. It's like a broader lens, and I start to be able to see connections and things that I didn't see before. And so it's really just a useful reframe to try and open up new insights, because we get into this patterned way of thinking and patterned behavior. And when we go through it, and then we start to see the same things over and over and over again. So if I change the inputs, then even if it's just the order of the inputs, then what I get on the output can be a little bit different. That's all for me anyway, Ryan. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah, totally, dude. Val.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So I just wanted to share. I need a space because I can't drag my massage table all over the world and back and take care of mom and all the things. And then, so we're talking about it. I go out, I try to find a space. I don't. Boom, it comes, falls in my lap, and it's bigger than I thought. So now I don't just have a place to do my body work, but we opened our health and wellness center. Okay. I was not ready for that. And this is why I'm bringing it up. But it fell into my lap. I had to respond to it. I didn't think I was ready. Our first month was a very soft month. This month, I've added more pieces. Next month, a few more. And then by summer, we'll be rolling into, you know, everything. But what I want to bring up is not just about what we do. We have to, in my opinion, we have to not just think about ourselves, but if we put the put ourselves out there and we take that step forward, and we're doing that, then we're also enabling other people to take their step forward. So I had this family come in, a grandmother with her two daughters, or her two granddaughters. And one of the granddaughters was so closed off when she walked in. Her face was frowning. She didn't, it looked like she did not want to be there, just not interacting, nothing. And as we moved through the course and I helped her with her earrings, the amount of pride that she had by completing two earrings, wearing them, letting us, putting her ear out for us like this, for us to photograph and walking out with a huge smile on her face was, it just confirmed to me exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm there. You know what I mean? It was so beautiful. I mean, tears. And when she left, my friend and I that were, working together, the class just started crying. We were just like, oh my God, this is it. Just
Yeah.
take the step. Take the fucking step. Because it's so, and the next thing you know, you're just like, whoa, what happened? And it's beautiful,
So
just
first,
have to
first
do it.
things first, I want everyone to go, and if you're able, go to that react button and hit that hand clap for Val, because she deserves it. She's been working on that for a very long time.
Aw,
I'm
thanks,
proud of
Jay.
you, girl. Look at all those applauses
You.
going on. You're welcome.
I can't see the applauses. I don't know how to work this thing, but it's okay.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just want to speak in is what Val is speaking about here um, is the pathway of initiative. It's what we talked about the last couple times we were on the call, right? There's this pathway of initiative that runs from your vocation to your culture. And when you take that initiative, this is exactly what I was just talking about too. The next pathway that connects your culture to your brand is the pathway of growth. And that's exactly what Val is experiencing right now. When we take a lined action that is true to our heart and to our soul, all of a sudden, this fractal of people start to form around us, and they all contain exactly the tools that we need in order to take the next steps. And that's what Val's experiencing with the finance guy, right? Like there are people that just show up all of a sudden, and you're like, whoa. Like I had a guy prop me to like help with integration at a healing center in Costa Rica. And I'm like, well, I've been thinking about moving closer to surf all the time. Maybe I go down there. Let's see what happens. So it's like stuff like that that comes out of nowhere. So thank you, Val. I appreciate you, my dear. Paul Marie, over to you, my friend.
Yes, I actually wanted to share a personal anecdote right off the bat of what you just said.
Please.
The only reason why I wanted to share this is because sometimes the help that shows up may not resemble what we think it should
Yeah.
look like.
Yeah. Please share.
At least for me, I'm an occultist myself, coming from Vedic astrology, and I would say really started my spiritual journey consciously in 2020. So I was coming from a place of thinking I had a lot of self-awareness, like very much so, and a lot of clarity as far as like what should come next, what it should look like, what it should bring me, which is so I won't even get into it. But anyways, that was mistake number one. But I essentially this time last year had been single for about 4 years, right? And I had done so much work on myself and thought, okay, this is what the next relationship, whenever it shows up, this is what it's going to look like. This is what I'm looking for. These are my criteria. It's great. Um, in my life specifically, the universe tends to like it'll send me, how do I say this? Like clues that it's trying to get me to go into a certain direction. The quicker I recognize that, the better it is for me. But sometimes I'm still convinced that it's not. So I met my current partner this time last year, and as far as where we are in our spiritual paths, fully like just not nowhere near on the same level, not implying that one level is better than the other, but just not on the same part
Sure.
of our journeys. Um, so for me already, that was a disqualification as far as this can't be the person I'm going to be with because what? But
I'm
but
such an advanced soul.
that's so advanced. Like, what? I'm not doing this. So then it became clear, like after a few months, that the universe was like, no, 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 no. This is where you're going to go. And again, I've done a better job at like recognizing the signs. So I begrudgingly said, sure, let's go. I'm like, I really don't know what you want me to do here, but sure. But long story short, I had a lot of work to do on confidence coming from an authentic place, not just like masquerading as being confident, but true confidence in myself and also in my voice, in speaking and sharing and saying what I have to say, right? Taking up space confidently. And he is someone that is extremely, extremely, extremely insecure and extremely, extremely fearful, right, in his life, in the ways that he shows us. So he doesn't ever speak up for himself, right? But now in hindsight, I'm realizing by being in close proximity to this person and loving them and wanting the best for them, it all of a sudden galvanized me to push out of my comfort zone and become an example for him. So in moments where I would normally, be a people pleaser or whatever, like not say what I want or whatever. All of a sudden, I was incentivized to no, 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 you kind of have to this time because you're trying to get him to. We've done this for about a year and a half now, and it's allowed me to really find my voice in a very authentic way. And I only found myself here by wanting to be a good example for him. And so it's such a, I don't know, like I never would have thought that this is the path we would have taken to get to this place. Truly, I would not. Um, and so I say that because just piggybacking on what you were saying, like the road ahead is not always the like doesn't look like always how we think it will be, but as long as we just kind of do a good job at recognizing that call, I think that's the best thing we could do for ourselves. So That's all.
Dude, such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like,
My pleasure.
so awesome. So two things that brought up for me. Number one, I have the exact same experience in the work that I'm doing now. So as I'm guiding people and mentoring people and with them in their journey, like it has made my devotion to what I do, to my life, to God, to like a bazillion times. It was like rocket fuel. I mean, it is indescribable how much more dedicated and focused I am now because I take on the responsibility very seriously. You know, like it is, I'm trying to change the world, like, and nothing short of that. And so I better behave in that way and with that understanding. I was listening to an interview from, I want to say it was John Mayer, honestly. And he was talking to his higher self and basically it was like, man, I want a life that is 100%, you know, like I want an all-in life. And his higher self was like, okay, I hear you, but do you know what that means? And John Mayer was like, say no more. This is what he said in the interview. Say no more. I got it. And then he goes on to describe, like, he saw so clearly, if I want 100% life, I need to live 100% in. And that means I have to shift my behavior and my distraction and all of the things that I'm doing that I know are not bringing me to manifesting that 100 life. I think so many of us want that life, but you look around at your disciplines and at your practices, and with a really honest look, can you say that you are living in a way that's going to lead to that life? Because if not, well, you know, you got some changes that you have to make. And then the other thing it brought up for me is just to help remind everyone that the path forward is really only illuminated one step at a time. So like Paul Marine knew that he needed to take this first step. And then when he did that, this next unexpected step of him needing to shift for his partner, like showed up. And then I'm sure another step showed up after that. And so Richard talks about this as like, you know, picture like a pathway of stones moving across water or something, right? And you're moving from stone to stone so that you don't fall into the water. We want to see the whole path, right? We want to see all the way to the other side of the lake and be able to see every single stone along the journey. But that's just not how it works. The way that it works is we step onto one stone, and then when we're there, we can throw the light far enough ahead just to see the next stone. So that is why we talk about it is necessary that you develop a relationship with the unknown. Because if you do not have a strong relationship with the unknown, you are going to be stuck on one of those stones. And you're never going to be able to manifest your life or what's on the other side of that lake. Because you're like, well, I can't see what's in front of the next stone. What if it's an alligator? What if that stone's not a stone? It's an alligator that's going to bite my foot off. And we got to get over that. We got to take the leap and be in faith and in trust. So this was actually a very amazing conversation for many reasons, for what I want to talk about today, which ultimately is the pathway of, or the pathway, quote unquote, because these are two non-pathway pathways of the quantum is what one is called, and then the other is called the pathway of individuation. And the reason that I say it's like a really good intro conversation is we were talking about doing things backwards, right? And we're talking about coming into full faith and trust. And ultimately, these are what these pathways do for us. So when I say the backwards thing, what I mean is there are paths through the golden path that are not the set pathways that are in the golden path. So an example of this is there is no actual pathway that connects the sphere of your SQ to the sphere of your vocation. But if you, or excuse me, there is no actual pathway that connects, let me look at a profile, the sphere of your SQ to the sphere of your culture. There we go. However, Richard talks about in the Seven Sacred Seals work that there is a triangle that forms between vocation, culture, and SQ. And I don't want to kind of spoil that, but I just getting the idea across that there are other pathways here that are hidden, and you need to use your intuition oftentimes to tap into those pathways. And the star pearl does an amazing job of like how you might use your intuition to decide what the pathways mean or represent. So just a little pitch for the star pearl for anybody if you're not in there. It really is super powerful thus far. Another one of those pathways that are not shown is what's called the pathway of individuation. So let me show you a little something. I'm going to turn off my video for a sec to try and get this to stop skipping, and I'm going to share a screen instead. Can you guys see that? I'm going to assume that's yes, because I'm not hearing anybody say no. If you can, okay, yeah, got it, yes. Okay, cool. So let's zoom in on this one. So this is the pathway of individuation. So we're starting down here at the sphere of our purpose, which obviously this green is the activation sequence. And then it goes up to the sphere of attraction, which that is an actual pathway. However, from there now we go up to the sphere of SQ. So we're bypassing the IQ and the EQ and jumping right to the SQ. And then from there going up to the pearl, and then from there going up to the brand. And so if you were to open up your Gene Keys profile and look at it, you'll see that this is just a center column that runs straight up and straight down your profile. I'm going to talk more about what that center column represents. It's also interesting to see that there are parts of the activation sequence, the Venus sequence, and the Pearl sequence. They're a part of this process. And if you were to take a profile and lay it over the human body, this line of spheres would go directly up the power line, the central column of your body. It would go right up your spine. And that's why this is such a very important pathway that we'll talk about what it represents and what it means today. And then this, of course, is just the Pearl sequence. But I just wanted to highlight these pathways of the quantum. So we have actual pathways that connect vocation to culture, culture to brand, and then brand to vocation with initiative, growth, and service. Then we've got these 3 lines, and these are actually on the profile. If you look at your profile, you'll see them there, and they are titled quantum. And we see there's one coming from each of the other spheres, vocation, culture, and brand, and connecting back into that Pearl sequence. And those lines are not fully connected, meaning they don't touch the sphere of the culture and they don't touch the pearl. So this isn't a direct path, it's a quantum path. And let's talk about what that means today. So that is what we're getting into. These are non-linear paths. In other words, they're not along the golden path anywhere. And I want to start, or we're going to start with a pathway of the quantum. But before we do, the last thing I'll leave you with on the pathway of individuation, just so you can start kind of percolating it around in your brain, is that another term for this pathway of individuation might be self-actualization or self-realization, to put it into, the term, like a more scientific terminology, if you will. I believe, isn't self-actualization the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Is that true? Does anybody? Yeah, I'm getting yeses. So I'm thinking that's a yes. So that's the language I want to use here for what is happening when you're walking the pathway of individuation. So so let's go to the pathway of the quantum. It is non-linear because it is a trinity that is becoming one. And I think it's really important that you start to understand the nature of trinities as you engage in the Gene Keys work and just in your life at large, because our life is about creating trinities. Because a trinity is what is on the other side of duality. It's not, we don't go, it's not back to one. It's up to this mystical three. And it's the mystical three that shows up because there is, let's do it in a relationship. There's me, there's my girlfriend, and then there is this unified field that happens when our two auras combine. And in that way, two becomes three, becomes one. And that is the same thing that happens with this pathway of the quantum. Yes, 1 and 1 equals 3, exactly. And in some way, 1 and 1 equals 1, which is also an interesting way to think about this too. And what we are trying to do as a collective, as humanity at large, is to have this recognition on a large scale. It's actually to see that 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus, 9 billion people on this planet equals 1. And that happens when this field starts to become together. Another thing that's interesting to think about with this is that there is no linearity, because when we enter the quantum, there is no time. Time falls away. And if you are familiar with the theory of relativity at all, even vaguely like me, I'm certainly no physicist, you know that your speed, the speed at which you are moving, affects time. I can't remember I think it's the faster you move, the more time slows down. So if that's true, well, then we know that something funky is going on with time, and things can happen outside of time. And these quantum moments are moments of leap, meaning they are not evolutionary in nature, or maybe they are, but it's in evolution, there are mutations. And that is a quantum leap. They make no sense, these moments of leap. In fact, they're oftentimes against science. So, for example, we went from an ape brain to a human brain in 200,000 years. In terms of evolution, that is like, way faster, way faster than we should have been able to develop this new brain that we have. And science would tell us that it's literally impossible, that it cannot happen. But it did. Same thing, going from no life existing. So go back to Earth when it was just an elemental planet. And then all of a sudden, there's life. That's a 0 to 1 moment that science cannot explain. It makes no logical sense, but it happened. And then it happened again when we went from a single-celled organism to a multi-celled organism. There are these moments of quantum leap. And what they are is a mutation. And what I want you to reframe that word. I think mutation has a negative connotation to it. Mutation is grace. It is a new form, a new thing that is born in the world that can help take us to a new place. So, if we look at the pathway of individuation, or think about the pathway of individuation, it brings all of the different sequences together, right? We've got the purpose, which is the end of the activation sequence. We've got attraction and SQ, which are Venus sequence. We've got Pearl and Brand, which are Pearl sequence, and Brand is also life's work in the activation sequence. So in the quantum world, we are bringing all of these different sequences together. And it's kind of like, I often talk about the Gene Keys profile being a misrepresentation of like what is actually happening with your gene keys. We have it mapped out like that because it makes it much easier for our logical mind to be able to see it and to be able to understand. We have a linear mind. It's just a limitation of being human, or at least for most of us. But it's much more realistic to think of your profile as one sphere being inside of another, inside of another, inside of another, inside of another, like a series of Russian dolls. Like if you ever had that toy when you were a kid, where like you opened up one and then there's another one inside, you open that one, there's another one. That's really more representative of what your profile is doing. And so the pearl is really, and the pathway of individuation. So the dawning of the pearl and the pathway of individuation are really a synthesis of everything that you have done thus far along the golden path. So what I'm trying to get you to understand with all of these words that I'm using is when you get to a certain point with your gene keys and with everything else in your life, you've got to let go of linearity and start to trust in your intuition and start to trust in miracles and start to trust in magic. The further along you get, the more you need to realize that all the rules bend and in some cases break. And we'll talk more about that here in a sec. Rebecca had a question. Can we bypass the golden path and hop into the quantum path? Yes. 100%. And as a matter of fact, Richard talks about two ways of using the gene keys. One is a more analog approach. The other is a more digital approach. And I can never remember which one's which. I want to say that the analog approach is like just noticing what's happening in the world. And the digital approach is more like following the golden path, like following the step-by-step journey. But for example, there is a whole arm of the gene keys that are called the dream arc. And the dream arc uses the animal kingdom to help bring different gene keys into your awareness. So every single animal has a different gene key representation. And so like for me, I've been seeing cardinals out the wazoo over the past couple days. So I can go and I can look and see, okay, what city, because the cities are all birds. I can look and go and I can see what city does the cardinal represent. And that in that way, that is the universe. That is God giving me the thing that might be worth my time to focus on right now. Instead of me needing to follow this, okay, now I'm in the pathway of, like, I know with the Venus retreat that Gene Keys HQ is doing, they're in the sphere of their SQ right now, right? So that's like, I'm going to study this. And they each have their time and their place. Sometimes that's the way. And other times the way is more kind of wild and magical and untamed, if you will. Any other questions about what we've done thus far while we're at that point? Okay. Okay, cool. So a few characteristics of quantum leaps. Now that we understand that we need to let go of that linearity and maybe we can let ourselves fall into the quantum, I want you to be aware of what you're looking out for. So number one is that quantum leaps are unpredictable. So you do not know when they are going to come, and you do not know what they are going to look like at all. So an example of this unpredictable nature is the dawning of the rainbow body. Has anybody ever heard of the rainbow body before? Yes. Okay, I'm seeing some hands. Great. So the rainbow body is something that if you look at art from back in the day, if you look at accounts from the Vedas, what you will find is that there are accounts through our history, human history, of avatars or at the very least awakened beings who manifest what appears to be like a translucent skin, like almost like a see-through skin. And it has this If you ever seen the paint job that like on sometimes people get on cars, it's like an oil slick, like as it drives by, it kind of like changes colors and moves and looks weird. People's bodies look like that. That is the dawning of the rainbow body. And it's not like these people were like worked their entire lives to don this rainbow body, because you can't do that. This is like, you need specific genes, you need specific archetypes. Not all of us who awaken are going to be able to have that rainbow body. It's all dependent. This is what the gene keys tell us. They tell us our specific flavor of awakening and how it will show up for us. However, I want you to imagine right now, like imagine if in present day, there is a human being in which the rainbow body dawns. Think about what that would do. In an instant, everything changes. Overnight, there is a new way that people are going to see the world because it does not fit in their current paradigm. That's all it takes, folks. One unpredictable event. And this whole thing is on a totally different path. And that's what happens when we're able to connect into the quantum field. Next, they are miraculous in nature. And when I say miraculous, I mean both capital M, miracle, like Jesus, water to wine, and lowercase m, miracles, like the miracle of, what's a miracle that I saw recently? Sunrise. I went and saw sunrise this morning. And the way that that made me feel inside is a miracle. Like, why do I feel that way? I don't know. But like, I almost started crying. It was so beautiful. There are these lowercase m miracles. Another example is like, it was my mom's birthday is the 31st of March and my daughter's birthday is the 1st of April. And we all went to a dinner together, and to see the interaction of 3 generations is miraculous. So these miracles they're wormholes to a new way of being, to a new way of seeing things in the world. And again, big miracles or little, doesn't matter. These moments of awe, of joy, they are things that when you like really let them into your heart, you start to open to a new way of being in the world. Things start to soften. Your heart starts to thaw. You begin to love again. You begin to see that you're a part of this giant whole. And when that happens, you better believe you're going to start acting differently. And when you act differently, you better believe the people around you are going to act differently. And then there's a totally new set of opportunities that have just come into your life from a simple act of noticing how beautiful the sunset is, because it is a miracle. And then lastly is that quantum leaps are contained in your DNA. They're in there as mutations, waiting to be translated. And when they happen, there's no going back. You're just going to be totally different. And how do I know that they're in there? I know that they're in there because of our obsession with myth, our obsession with superheroes and superpowers. Like, I feel like there hasn't been a movie in the movie theater over the past 5 years that isn't a Marvel movie. It's because we are so obsessed with flying, with going invisible. These are all things that Richard talks about in the Siddhis that are a reality for humanity at a certain point. We just have to get to a place where we are in this quantum field and we know it. We trust in the unknown. We trust that that next stone isn't going to be an alligator. Logic only takes us so far on this journey. It's actually one of the dilemmas of the gene keys is logical thinking. I want to say it's 63 that is the dilemma of logic. It's doubt. 63 is doubt, inquiry, truth. And that gene key talks about our obsession with logically understanding things. 61 is another strong one in this realm also. Our obsession with needing to logically understand something. But logic only gets you so far. And if you stay attached to logic, just like if you stay attached to the pathways of the golden path, you're going to, at a certain point, handcuff yourself and blind yourself to what is on the other side of logic. Because our brain is not designed to understand the universe or how it works. It's just not. So trying to understand all this, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. We've got to let go. An example of logic only taking us so far is and I've used this before too, so forgive me if you've heard this before. I'm sure many of you have. You know, scientists have this saying, which is, we'll tell you exactly how the world works if you just will give us one thing. What do you think that one thing is? The Big Bang, the creation of everything. Like, if you just, can just trust us that like there was everything, then we can tell you all how it works. But we can't get back to the Big Bang. We have no idea where all this stuff came from. So logic gets us right to the edge of being able to understand, but it does not bring the understanding. The way that the understanding comes is through the feminine. It comes through the yin mind, through the whole, from seeing everything, not the yang, which sees only the parts and tries to dissect and understand. We've got to take it all in. It's the difference. Man, this blew my mind. This is something Richard said somewhere along the way. The left brain, when it sees a sunset, what's happening is language, right? It's like, oh, look at the orange. Look at the bird flying in front of the sun. Look at how the reflection is coming on the water. That's how the left brain sees a sunset. The right brain just sees beauty. There's no word. There's no analysis. It's just this field of being, this field of energy. And that's what I'm asking you to step into. And it's hard. It's scary. Because you got to leave all your anchors behind. And you've got to trust in the unknown. Okay. Yeah. So the last thing I wrote here is that logic always ends in paradox. And the way that you get into the miracle field is to let go of the paradox. There are a couple of cities that I want to talk about that are what Richard calls the miracle cities. And I know of two. I think there are more than two, honestly, but I have two of them in my profile. So I know that at least these two are part of this squad. So the 35th, which is my SQ, which is hunger, adventure, boundlessness. So let's think of that word boundlessness. What does that mean? It means that there is nothing that is limiting us. Nothing. Which means time doesn't limit us, and it means space doesn't limit us. So when we become truly boundless, when that city dawns, what we are talking about is a human who can move through time, aka time travel, and a human that can move through space, aka teleport. This is what we're talking about, that it was within the human DNA that we have a capacity for. If you have ever read the book Autobiography of a Yogi, First of all, if you haven't read that book, I really encourage you to read it. Yogananda is, yeah, look at Kate with it sitting right next to her. Awesome. So if you haven't read that book, do it. Yogananda is who wrote it. And there is a man, an avatar, a being in that book, whose name is Babaji. And Babaji is this being who has been seen in the East over hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, comes back, helps humanity, leaves, shows up different random places all the time. This is the 35th city. Michelle, please.
I'm kind of new to this, so I'm sorry if I'm overstepping or going the wrong direction. I have two numbers that show up twice in my gene key, and does that have any significance on the path that I'm supposed to be taking?
So great question, common question also. And the answer that Richard gives is that it probably is just something that deserves a little bit of extra attention. But other than that, no. Like that's very common. A lot of people have two or even three of the same gene key in their profile.
Okay.
Yeah. So just spend a little bit of extra time with it, I would say. I have 56 twice, for example. Okay. So then the other miracle city that I want to talk about is the 60th city of justice, which is about divine balance. And so if you understand divine balance, which just means that everything has its both ends, right? Has both sides, both polarities. If there is gravity, then there must be what Richard calls levity. In other words, if there is a binding force pushing us down, there is this other force that is lifting us up. And so if there is this other force that is lifting us up, well, that's how we fly. Just like all the superheroes that we're obsessed with. So I say all this to try and help you let go of the logic that you are feeling, because it's a farce. It's just not true. But it will be true unless you open your mind to some other potentials and some other possibilities. Just like the placebo nocebo effect. If you believe that a medicine will work, it will work almost as good as if it were a sugar pill. If you believe that a medicine will not work, it will not work, even if it's the strongest medicine in the world. So a lot of this has to do with our intention and has to do with our awareness. So the quantum leads us, or is basically the same thing as what Richard talks about is absorption. So when we fall into absorption is when we start to fall into the quantum. And what I mean by absorption is all of the energy that we have been putting out into protecting ourselves or into trying to chase down some desires because we don't feel whole. We don't feel like that we have everything that we need. So we spend a ton of energy reaching out to get things and a ton of energy putting up this pushing out, like with this force field to keep things away so that we feel safe. Absorption is taking all of that energy and recapturing it for yourself, which then translates into service to the whole. And so what we end up doing with absorption is we create a toroidal energy field. And so think about that pathway of individuation, right? Running up the central column of our body. That energy comes out through our brand, through our voice, through our way of being in the world. However, instead of it like constantly needing to plug holes or pushing it out or pulling it in, we just let it go. And then what starts to happen is the energy that we put out because of the 60th gene key, because of justice, the law of divine balance, what you put out is what comes back to you. So we just trust and we let that energy fall down over us. And then it comes back in our base, back in through the sphere of our purpose. that purpose constantly grounding us down to our earth, that thing that we are here to do through our dharma and through our karma. And then it makes its way back up, right? It comes through our purpose. It bubbles through that sphere of attraction where we call in the people and the situations that we need. And then it goes up and it filters through our heart, through our SQ, so that we make sure that we're speaking and hearing only love. And then it moves through our pearl, through this field of synchronicity, this miracle field, and finally back up through the brand. And it just happens on repeat, infinity, over and over and over again. And each time it happens, your heart gets a little bit brighter, your belly gets a little bit softer, and your light gets a little bit brighter. And it is a beautiful process to be a part of and to see in other people. So there is a trinity, or there are lots of trinities. Any questions on any of that stuff? And then I'm going to go into a trinity, the Trinity of Absorption. But that was a lot of stuff. I got on a roll there. Sorry, that happens sometimes. Anything else?
That was great.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just keep on rolling then. Mac, go ahead. Thank you for giving me a break.
Pleasure. Okay, doc. So I've been writing down because I take notes when you're doing it, and you went to the SQ, and I kind of lost you, and then you kind of sped up, and I was like, "Whoa, I'll have to rewatch this." But can you just kind of quickly just put the keywords for the SQ and the Pearl and the brand, please?
Just like what's happening as it passes through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in the SQ, that's our heart filter. So that is basically where we filter everything so that we can see and hear only love, right? Even if somebody's screaming at us, we hear it as a call for love. Then we move up to our pearl, which is the miracle field, the miracle filter, the sphere of synchronicity. So that's where we get our external help that we don't really understand at all, but that's, trust me, it comes. and then finally we get to our brand, which is where we're able to express all of this stuff that has passed through us, that is filtered through us. And when we express it, not just through our words, but more importantly, through our being, that expression, whatever we put out, is what we get back. And so that's that trust, or that's what closes that kind of toroidal loop, which then starts again with the sphere of our purpose.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, my dear.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so this trinity that I want to go into now is one of the trinities. There are lots: pause, pivot, merge, shadow, gift, city. And this one is contemplation, absorption, embodiment. This is a very important trinity. It is probably the trinity if you want your gene keys to open in your life. If you are treating the gene keys as a knowledge system, in other words, you're just trying to learn what's there, you're trying to gather facts, you can throw this trinity out the window. But if you do that, your life's not going to change. You're not going to fall into that synchronous. Well, I shouldn't say that. You might in a different way, but it's going to be a longer path, or maybe a different path. Because what the gene keys are doing, they are a wisdom. They are this living, breathing field. But we've got to give them time to show up both inside and outside of us. And the way that we create that time and that space is with contemplation. And contemplation really only requires a couple of things. Number one is that it requires the time. So it requires a pause. You've got to make space in your life. And I know you're like, dude, I'm busy. I don't have time to pause. I'm telling you, the more you pause, the more time you get. One of those paradoxes that is just true. I don't know why it's true. I don't know how it's true, but I know that it is true. The other thing that is necessary is something that you are contemplating, right? Some like thing that you have very loosely holding in your awareness that is just rolling around in there. And you kind of let your mind wander, but your anchor is that thing. So maybe that's a gene key, maybe it's a line, maybe it's a pathway, maybe it's a sphere, maybe it's a problem in your life, maybe it's an emotion you have. It doesn't matter. All roads lead to Rome and death. Inside joke for myself. So I cannot tell you how important contemplation is and how much it is necessary. Then what comes from that is absorption. So we start to see more and more. We start to reclaim or recapture piece by piece the energy that we had been casting out to the world. All of a sudden, we see this pattern of like, oh, when somebody, let me try and think of an example in my life. Okay. So when somebody does something that shifts the plan for the day, you get all tight and nervous about what's going to happen. Like things aren't going to plan. It didn't meet your expectation. That's me. And so when I see that and when I contemplate it and I can start to see the pattern and it becomes aware, that's how it starts to melt and let go. And then I've captured that piece of myself back. And so now that particular energy line is back inside of me. And then I do that with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And before we know it, we've captured all this energy and we are in absorption. And then what comes from absorption, this is the third part of the Trinity. So it's contemplation, absorption. This third part is embodiment. And embodiment is when we take all of this stuff from a logical belief to this is how I move through the world because I know it is true. I don't just believe it is true. I know with certainty it is true. And the only way that you can know with certainty that something is true is you have to take the leap. I don't care how many wisdom streams you take in, how many times you've read the Bible, the Tao Te Ching, the Vedas, the Gene Keys. These are stories of people talking about making the leap and telling you what's on the other side. And they are all true. And you can logically believe them from engaging with the material. But to actually jump is the only way to know if there is actually a force that is out there that is going to support you in what you are doing. It is going to help you open your heart. It's like the difference in you can go to the library and read 100 books on how to ride a bike. But when you get on the bike for the first time, you're going to fall over because you don't know how to ride a bike. You think you know how to ride a bike. You thought about the bike. You have an understanding of how the bike works, but you don't know. And that's what embodiment is. It's taking the leap so that you can know. And it comes from taking a risk because you're not going to know. You're going to think, you're going to have strong evidence. And that's why I said all roads lead to death, because it feels like you're going to die when you take that leap. That's what you're overcoming, is the fear of death. The fear of not being accepted, of being cast out, of it not working and you not having the resources that you need. But when embodiment happens, it is a whole new worldview. And I've got what might be good news for some of you or what might be bad news for some of you. Embodiment, I thought, and I'm definitely not fully embodied, so please don't take it as such. But I thought that there was going to be like all sorts of fireworks and stuff and like halos and like I was going to be able to read people's minds and, like all these spiritual gifts that you hear about. But in reality, embodiment and the pearl, which dawns with embodiment, brings us back to the ordinary. It brings us back to our work, our families, our community, doing the dishes, cleaning the house, watching the sunrise in the morning. That's where embodiment takes us. And it brings an end to seeking. Holy fuck, what a relief that is. I don't know about you guys, but the amount of energy that went into seeking. And of course, I still have fun with it, right? And I'm still taking in this esoteric wisdom, but it's with such a lighter touch. It's not like I need to end my suffering to understand what's happening. And when that shift happens, you take a deep breath for the first time in a very long time. Your breath is intimately tied to your embodiment and to your purpose and to the dawning of the pearl. In fact, I believe each in the star pearl, each of the different spheres has like a physical embodiment. So like the sphere of stability is your feet. And I believe that the pearl is your breath. We get this deep breath back again. And when the pearl dawns, it really is our harvest for all of the work that you did, all of the seeking that you did, all of your work on the golden path. That's why it's not a pathway. That's why there's not a road that leads to the pearl. We don't get there that way. We get there through the quantum. We get there by letting go of the linearity. It is a gift from the causal plane. So the causal plane is one of our, well, there's the causal body and it connects to the causal plane. It's the land of our soul. It's the land of myth and archetype and story. That's why myth and archetype and story are so impactful for us. They connect us to our soul. And the gift of the pearl comes from that place, the causal plane, which think of the causal plane like a combination of your head, your heart, and your belly. All three of those things come together. And when they fire together and we see them as a unified field, right? Like I said, instead of seeing the sunrise or the sunset as in words, we see it just as this field of, as this kind of like energy space. When that happens, that's when you'll start to see the gift of whatever you have in your pearl, and maybe even the city of whatever you have in your pearl. When you are so busy seeking, sorry, I just ate a piece of banana and it was a bigger bite than I thought it was. So when you are so busy seeking, reaching out, you disconnect yourself from that causal plane. And that gift that God is just trying to give to you stays blocked. It can't arrive. Now, the good news is you can't choose to stop seeking. So if anybody's listening to me right now and is like, okay, Jay said it's on the other side of stopping seeking, so I just got to stop my seeking. Doesn't work. You cannot stop it. Once that flame is lit, it is lit. And the only way to get to the other side is to burn through every bit of fuel that is there. You just got to keep going and keep going and keep going. And at a certain point, it will let go of you, not the other way around. At least that was my experience. So that's good, I think, because you just get to honor yourself and what you need. And you don't have to like lock up all your Bibles in a closet because you can't seek anymore. When that happens, when the seeking, when we get to the other side, what starts to happen is the pauses. So going back to contemplation and the needing to take pauses, the pauses become more important than the content of your life. So the empty space is what you crave more than the things, than the doing, than all of that stuff. That's like a really good indicator that you are getting really, really close, where when those pauses are like the thing that feel most important in your life. We got to remember that we're half human and that we're half spirit. And I think honestly, it varies. Like one day we might be 90% human, 10% spirit. The next day we might be 90% spirit, 10% human. But we need both. We need the doing and we need, we need to eat, and we're sexual beings and we like money and trips and all of that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. However, it needs to be balanced with the space, with the pauses, with the emptiness, with the soul. And when we are able to do that, that is when we slip into rhythm and then ultimately flow with the universe. Pauses are what bring us into flow. So if you feel like you have been fighting against the flow of the river over and over and over, and you're exhausted and you're tired, take a pause. Let yourself get back into that flow, because I promise when you are in the flow, which comes on the other side of letting go, that's it. You don't have to shift anything other than letting go, which I know is easier said than done. You end up back in universal rhythm and universal flow. And everything feels easy again. Okay, questions. That's the end of the quantum stuff. Any questions with regard to any of the Pearl sequence or the pathway of quantum itself, any of the spheres, any of that?
I can relate to everything that you just said. I think I mentioned this to you on one of our calls where um, the importance of the pause for me, where a lot of contemplation took place and a lot of growth took place, is kind of like the period that I'm in now, but that I've been in for the last 3 years. Yeah, 3 years or so. So it just sometimes I equated it to the alchemist when he gets to the what is it, that caravan, that town, that in the desert, the little
Yep.
town in the desert, and he ends up staying there for 3 fucking years, and it's like, oh my God, what what is happening? And so I find myself at that stage of my journey where a lot of growth has been done, contemplation has been done. Definitely thankful for that. And then I guess it's like part of the human nature to get kind of jittery in like the idleness of it all. So I just have to constantly remind myself that like I will eventually shift into another chapter that's coming, but to just stay vibrating high.
Yeah. And remember that everything that you're doing now, even though it's in this kind of pause space, is contributing to what's on the other side of the pause space. Like the example that I use is from James Clear in the book that he wrote, Atomic Habits. If anybody has ever read that book, if you haven't, it's great. You should read it. But in that book, he talks about, he uses an example of an ice cube that's in a room that is 24 degrees, let's say. And you put a ton of energy and effort into heating up that room. And it goes to 26 degrees and 28 degrees. And still the ice cube is just sitting there and it looks like nothing has happened. And then we get to 30 degrees, no change, but we've put in so much effort, right? But the ice cube hasn't moved, but the room's getting warmer. And then 31 degrees, nothing. 32 degrees, still nothing. And then all of a sudden, we get to 33 degrees and it starts to shift and move. And we tend to think we identify with the ice cube instead of the heating of the room. And I just want to remind you of the heating of the room. Like that's the process that you are in right now. Don't think for a second that what you're doing isn't directly going to contribute to whatever the thing is that comes next.
That was amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. The other thing that I think might help too is the Bible, right? Like the Israelites were in the desert for 40 fucking years wandering around. 40 years. Like it takes time sometimes. It takes time. And I honor you for hanging in there, dude. I know it's hard. Okay. Do I want to get into individuation today, or do we want to save that for next time? I think I can get through it. Go ahead, Mac.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's just not appropriate to have my image on. It reminds me very much of the creative process. When we were trying to work something out and then we leave it and take a bath.
Yes.
And suddenly it happens. And that's what I do with the gene keys. I learn and read and reread and then just let it go. And then I get insights.
Totally. Same on my end. I'm listening to this book right now that's called Stolen Focus. It's the same author of Sapiens. If you've ever read Sapiens, that's a great book. But it's all about like the rise of social media and how it's pulling our focus away. And one of the chapters is about, not only, I'm going to turn my camera off for a second since my computer's freaking out. Not only is there an issue with like the spotlight, right? Our awareness, which is like a spotlight, which like focuses in on something like that is really weak right now largely because of social media. We're constantly scrolling. And so it's hard for us to stick with something for an extended period of time. But another thing that is really like struggling right now is our ability to shut everything out, to shut off, right? Because it's such a fast and busy world. And he talks about like, it's when we shut off the spotlight and we turn on the floodlight, that's when we're able to synthesize everything, right? To bring things together and to build new connections. And I think that's what Mac is speaking to here is like, you've got to pause and stop and leave open space so that your brain and what's called your default mode network, which is like an area of your brain, can do its thing. And you can synthesize information. Okay. Questions, comments? Let's get it going. And this will be a kind of a quicker touch on this because I just want to close this loop. But pathway of individuation, I already showed you what it looked like, which is also, as I said, think of this as self-actualization or self-realization. So it starts in our sphere of purpose, which is our way of being in the world. It's really important that you understand that. It's nothing that you do. It is your way of being in the world. Your purpose comes about through shedding all of the nonsense that you've picked up across your life, not by taking more knowledge, not by taking more certifications, getting this degree or that. That's going to hide your purpose. Your purpose is in there. It needs to come out. And when we are settled in our purpose, what we get is this sense of core stability. So core stability is a pathway that connects in the activation sequence, your radiance to your purpose. And core stability is this sense that we can handle whatever life comes our way because of our relationship to God or the universe or whatever word you want to use there. So your purpose is about knowing that you are supported. It's about knowing that you are a human. And once we do that, once we have that understanding, then we go up to that next step in the pathway of individuation, which is the sphere of attraction. And again, this isn't linear. I'm going to talk about it in a linear way, but remember, it's not linear. So the next step in the process is attraction, or the sphere of attraction, which, as you know, is part of the Venus work. So it comes, at least a clean attractor field, because you can absolutely, your attractor field's working all the time. It doesn't matter what frequency you're at, it's working. So we've got to clean that attractor field so that we are getting the people, the places, the things that come to us that further our absorption and eventual embodiment. And that comes from opening our heart and not constantly tripping ourselves up from our wounding patterns over and over and over again. It comes from an acceptance of our dharma and our karma, the two paths that lead into and lead out of that sphere of attraction. It's our karma that calls in what's next for us. It calls in the next set of lessons that we need that allow us to move to this next sphere in our pathway of individuation, which is the sphere of your SQ. So that's the opening of your heart. If you lay the profile over a human body, that SQ is laying right on your heart space. And so we've got to open our heart, which means accepting. Another trinity that I didn't talk about. Allow, accept, embrace. When we open our heart, we accept everything. And we know that our heart can open wide enough to handle anything that comes our way. Later, Paul Marie. Good to see you, bro. Anything that comes our way. And it gives us an ability to return non-love with love. And when we do that, again, we stop tripping ourselves up all the time and our attractor field is clean. We're firmly rooted in our purpose, right? This goes both ways, up and down. And then after our SQ, after our heart is open, then we come to the pearl, which is the harvest. It's us re-entering life as the fool. I love to talk about the fool. It's one of my favorite archetypes. In the tarot, there's two fools. There's the fool that is the zero, and there is a fool that is at the very end. So the fool is the sandwich that holds all the other cards together. The fool in the beginning is born of innocence and naivety. And the fool at the end is somebody who has so much wisdom that they've been able to let go of everything that they've gathered along their path. And in that way, they return to emptiness. So you're empty at the beginning. And if you really and truly walked your path, you're empty at the end. And when you're empty, when you're the fool, that's when the pearl can dawn. Unsurprising, Lily. And then lastly, once that pearl has dawned, or as that pearl has dawned, as I said, then our brand is like really singing out to the world. Our voice is vibrating the exact energy that we need to speak to the people that are in our fractal, that are going to help us through whatever it is that we're doing. Maybe we serve them, maybe they serve us. It doesn't matter. But it's your brand. It's speaking from your heart, filtered through that miracle field that allows this to happen. And when you do that, when you speak in service to the whole, you start to feel the living wisdom that is the gene keys. And that absorption, that realization begins to take place as you begin to see the mythical nature of not just the whole world. You don't just see the archetypes outside of you, you see your life as a myth. That's what gives you the courage to slay the dragon. That's essentially what's being asked for you. That's why the dragon slaying myths are there. Like, think of the biggest, scariest thing that you can think of. That's the thing that you're here to deal with. So what starts to happen as we individuate is we begin to see the gene keys as a terma, which is a Tibetan term. It's like a term for teaching or treasure. There are these hidden termas all throughout time and space, just waiting for the right time to open. And the gene keys is one of the first wisdom streams that is a true synthesis of East and West. I mean, there are so many different streams contained in the gene keys. The Tibetan wisdom is in there. The Indian wisdom is in there. The Bible is in there. Hermes is in there. The alchemical stuff. I mean, you name it across the board. All Jung's work is in there. All the psychology. It's all present. And when it starts to open in you, you become what's called a chodak, a lineage holder for this wisdom stream. And that comes with a sense of responsibility. And it's also an interesting point at which we need to make sure we're not confusing the banks of the river with the river itself. Even though I see myself, as somebody that is holding the lineage of the gene keys, I don't know why. The first time I took in the gene keys, I felt like I was remembering something, not learning something. And it's very easy, or can be very easy, because of all my 6 lines. It's not as easy for me, I think, but it's very easy for people to get attached to this is the way, right? The gene keys are the way, and it's not true. Gene keys are a way, and there are many other ways that we can get there. So we've got to let go, and we've got to use wisdom differently. We've got this responsibility to get to embodiment. And when you are embodied, from that point, like, okay, great, I'm here teaching, I'm here talking to all of you guys, and I hope it's useful, and I hope you find some nuggets that you can take away. But honestly, like, what I really care about is that you being in my field, in my space, allows you to go back and realize that there's a different way in moving in the world. Like, there's another way to operate, and it is miraculous and synchronistic and loving and beautiful. Like, that's what I hope you take. Not any of this knowledge, any of knowing this sphere or that sphere. Like, it's helpful, sure, and take that too, but understand that there's something deeper that's happening there. Okay, last thing I'm going to show you. Actually, any questions while I pull this last piece up? Cool. I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to turn off my video again so that my computer doesn't freak out. So this is a little thing that I made that I think might be helpful to kind of talk through. So I made this as part of as I was looking through hours and hours and hours and hours of recordings that I have, both here from wisdom calls and also within the container that I have, my one-on-one calls, reviewing all of those, the group that I have going, that's like this, but just for the people that are in there. I rewatched all of that stuff, and I pulled out what I think is happening and what I think the process is that I am helping move people through. And so I thought it might be helpful to see this process. So when we start this work, I think very often we are in this place, asking ourselves the question, how can I make myself successful? And you can define, and that's why success is in quotes here. You can define success however you want to define success. It doesn't matter whether you think of that as money or being in a relationship or having the house that you want or being able to go on vacation or whatever, you name it, whatever you want to put in there. What ends up happening is something that looks like this. So we are in the center, our ego self, and it is riddled with limiting belief. Right? We think that we are not worthy. We think that there is a right way to do things. We think that we need to be perfect. All of these beliefs that we pick up largely from our parents in our early childhood. And we are riddled with our past and our future story, meaning I was this way in the past, ergo, I must be this way in the future. Or thinking about all the guilt and shame that you have from your past, or thinking about everything that's happening in your future and fear around what's happening in your future. And what happens is this field of distortion comes around you. And that field of distortion is basically, you see those arrows pointing in, they're keeping you trapped, they're keeping you stuck. And so what you think when you are in this place is that all of those spheres on the outside, so you're reaching for purpose and money, you're reaching for connection, you're reaching to be more creative, for trust, for more fun and innocence and joy, to find a sense of stability. You see all of those things as outside and you just can't quite get there because of this field of distortion pushing back in you. And I realized that what's happening in this deep work is the question changes, which is now, how can I be of greatest service to the whole? And when that question changes, this is what ends up happening. So all of the stuff that was over here outside of us, we realize that all of that the entire time has just been contained inside. Ourself within, we are trust. We have purpose. We are stable, connective, creative, and fun. It's been there all along. And when we realize that, this field of synchronicity happens and we are able to create impact and service and love and peace and genius out in the world. And that's what I want for you. That's how I want you to move. And this is the process. And I'll talk more about this, so don't worry, I'll save this for another time. But this is what I've identified as the process of how to go from here to here. And that ultimately is the work that I am engaging in and out doing in the world. So keep your eyes peeled. There's going to be more on this coming. This is what we're going to be working on in this container in June. So lots more coming, lots of pieces. If you are interested right now, I have nothing for you. I'm not even taking one-on-one clients right now. Like everything is on pause until this thing is ready. And this is going to be the next big piece. So if that tickles your fancy, it's going to be paired with Venus work. And also my girlfriend, my partner, Courtney, is a PhD neuroscientist. And we're going to bring in a lot of nervous system work also. So that is kind of the field of what's going to be happening. So all that to say, thank you for being here today. Thank you for engaging in this work. I hope that it was helpful. And when the replay is ready, I'll let you guys know.